So this happened when I was 15. I was going to have a walk to join a friend during this afternoon in this little city I lived in at that time. There was a heavy rain, and I had to cross a bridge to get to my friend's location. When I was on the bridge, a car stopped. I recognized the driver. It was an old friend of my family I haven't seen since I was 8 or 9. His name was Joseph, and he was a priest. Even though I'm not a believer, I remember him as a fun and very kind man, always smiling and making jokes. He married my uncle and auntie and also baptized my dad. So I was pretty relieved to see this familiar face. He asked me if I wanted him to drive me somewhere since it was raining so hard. I smiled and accepted his proposition. I was only a kilometer away from my destination. At that moment, I didn't consider the type of car I was in. It was an old van with a young driver sign at the back, which is pretty uncommon for a 70-year-old man. I started talking to him and asked what he was doing here. He answered me that he just came back from a safari in Africa. That didn't surprise me that much. I know he was a traveler. So I supposed he was going to visit my grandmother, who was living not far from my place. I asked him if that was so, but he didn't answer. I realized that there was something wrong here, so I asked, "You are Joseph, right?" He looked at me and said, "No, I'm not Joseph." I was frightened. I instantly panicked, and this moment is a bit confused in my head, but I took off my security belt, told him to let me out, banging my hands on the car window. At a moment, he finally stopped without saying anything, but it appeared like an eternity for me. I jumped out of the car, ran to my friend, and literally fell on the floor, trying not to think about what just happened. The story feels very weird for me. I'm 24 now, but I've always been very careful about my safety. I also remember how sure I was when I thought I recognized him. In my head, there was no way I was wrong about it. Now I know I was, but I still don't figure out how this happened. This story happened when I was 17. Now I'm 21. I'm French, so pardon my English. I used to live in a small city in France with my mom and my dog in a little neighborhood where almost everybody knows each other. There was mostly old people living around me, but a few weeks before my story happened, a family moved in the house next to mine. I don't remember seeing them. I just heard children laughing and playing in the yard sometimes. Every year in January, my mom goes on holiday for a month in different countries, so my grandmother, who lived 5 minutes away, used to come and stay with me at home. But this year I was old enough to stay alone, so I did. I wasn't really sociable at this time, but my best friend was. She was always trying to make me meet new people, so we decided to take advantage of the fact that my mom was away to do a party in my place. It was more like a before than a full party because everybody was going to the club after this. But I didn't want to go with them. I never really enjoyed it, and the city center was far from home, so my plan was just to invite everybody, make some friends, have some drinks, then go to bed. The night came and everybody arrived. There were 3 girls and 5 boys. I was having a good time, even if I was a bit stressed that somebody breaks something in the house or gets sick on the carpet. But none of this happened. We were just sitting on the terrace, chatting and drinking with music. Then we heard a knock at the door. It was about 11 p.m. when this happened, so I thought it was just a neighbor coming to complain about the noise. I told everybody to stay quiet and I turned down the music. One of the guys opened the door to see who it was, and then came to me saying, "Hey, there is your new neighbor at the door. He wants to come in and party with us." I was confused, so I went to the door to see him. Appeared a man about 35 years old, bald, glasses, not tall, but a bit corpulent, with a bottle of Jack Daniels in his hand. My first reaction was to laugh, because I didn't believe this guy wanted to party with teenagers like us, and if it was true, it would have been super weird. But obviously, it was true. He told me he was new here, so he didn't have anybody. He was happy to see some young people and just wanted to share a drink with us. But I could understand because, as I said before, there really was only old people around. I thought maybe we all looked older than we really were. So I told to the man everybody in the house was under 18, and it made him understand that he wasn't really welcome here. But everybody thought it was just to be nice and didn't want to see it wrong. So I got influenced and decided to let him sit on the terrace with us. I still didn't feel really safe, so I told him, please, just don't go into the house. One of the guys told me not to worry, and that he will keep an eye on him. The night was going on, everybody was having fun, and finally nothing looked that strange. The man was talking with everybody about basic stuff, making jokes, laughing with the guys, etc. He just seemed like a nice man. And if a bit lost to stay with underage people when you have your wife and children probably waiting for you next door. My opinion. I started to relax and enjoy. Then about 2 a.m., it was time for everybody to go to the club, for me to clean a bit and go to bed. They all left at the same time. The man left too, saying he was going home. We have been on the terrace most of the time, so the cleaning was fast. I closed the windows, locked the door. I thought I did, at least, and went to bed, watching Pretty Little Liars to fall asleep. 1 hour later, I heard a noise. Remember I said I had a dog? His tiny paws used to make a tip-tap noise when he was walking on the wooden floor. But I was so used to this noise that this time I knew it wasn't him walking on the floor. My room was on the second floor, up to the ground floor. So I went out of bed, ran down the stairs, and stopped. The man was here, in the middle of my house, staring at me. This maybe last 2 seconds, then he ran out of the house and smashed the door behind him. I called the police straight to tell what happened. They told me to close my door, and that was it. I was paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. My mom was at the other end of the world and didn't know I was having a party at home. So I called my dad, who was living 10 minutes away, but he didn't answer. I took my fluffy shoes, closed my door by key, and decided to run as fast as I could to my grandma's apartment. I was half naked, running in the middle of the night, hoping that guy wasn't following me. When I arrived, I didn't want my grandmother to have a heart attack, so I just stayed in the hallway, lying on the floor, waiting for the morning to come. I called my friend to tell her. She was shocked and told me she was coming back to me, but she had to wait for the bus first, around 6 in the morning. When the sun finally came up, I went back to my place, and all the people who were with me arrived too. They were determined to kick the ass of my neighbor. They knocked at his door, but he wasn't answering, so they broke his front gate, which literally fell on the floor. It was made of shitty wood, so pretty easy to break. The man came, started to shout, and one of the guys punched him in the face. That felt good to see that. Anyways, after this, everybody went home. I put my ideas back to place and went to the police to make a complaint against him. Police officer told me he was going to see him in the afternoon. After that, my dad asked why I called at that time in the night, so I explained what happened, and he went to see the man too. The problem is, the man didn't say the same version to my dad and to the police. First, he said that he forgot his wallet in the house, which is impossible because I made sure I didn't put a single foot inside the house. Then he said he thought the party wasn't over, which is also impossible because he left same time as everybody and knew I was staying home alone. I still don't know why he came back, and I'm not sure I want to know. Back around 1992, I was in high school at that time. I was a sophomore, and unlike most of my friends in school, I didn't work the typical high school jobs like McDonald's, Taco Bell, some retail job in the mall, or work at the local grocery store. I was very good with my hands and worked jobs like construction, demolition, flooring, and auto mechanics. All my contacts I worked under the table as I started working on some of these jobs at 14. It was beneficial for both of us as I was only called in when needed, and I was the guy willing to only work evenings and weekends. One of my contacts worked during remodeling projects like at restaurants, bars, retail shops, and typical commercial projects that we could only work after hours. Like I said, That worked out for both of us because I went to school and sometimes work after school or weekends. For this one contact, it was uncommon for him to leave me alone at a site and have a list of things for me to do, alone, mostly demolition work. I did this while the other crew was doing the installation of or remodeling. I was a kid who had the respect because I did what I was supposed to do and did the work of a man without complaints. I got paid good, and in one night I could make more than my friends did working all week at McDonald's. This one instance, I got a call from a guy I worked for, and he said he had a project for me and if I could work the following Saturday. I said, yeah, sure. He said he'd be sure to bring food and lots to drink, as there was nothing nearby. I used to have a small cooler and would fill it with drinks like Cokes, Gatorade, or whatever, plus chips and a couple sandwiches. Back then, I could eat a whole pizza by myself and burn it all off. He picked me up that Saturday morning, as I didn't have a car or license yet. So he would pick me up and drive me to the sites for work and leave me alone there. I rarely worked with his other crews, as they were the more skilled labor guys. I was just the tear-out kid. Here's that part that my major downfall to this story. I didn't pay attention to where we were going. I was too busy talking to him, and I think we were talking about cars. You see, at that time, my goal was to save up enough money to buy an old muscle car and rebuild it. It took a long time to arrive to the site. As we drove up, it was in the middle of nowhere. Now, you may not think California has places like this, but back in the early 1990s, out in the Mojave Desert, yes, it was big plots of land and homes more than a few city blocks apart. I knew we'd left the highway and went down a few other two-lane highways for a long distance. I remember he asked me about my drinks, and he pulled out a brand new jug of water that he had in his truck that looked like it had been there for a while. Told me to take it with me just in case. I said that the water to the house I was working. He said that the water to the house I would be working at was off. As we pulled up to the property, he was in a hurry to drop off tools and get to another work site, so I had to hurry up and help him with things like breaker bars, shovels, pry bars, hammer, broom, several big trash bins, and a small tool bag that I often had with me. He tells me that he will be back to pick me up at about 5 to 6 p.m. as there was no electricity to the site either, plus it should only take me till then to do what I needed to do. That was always his way of saying, I am only paying you till this time, so you better get everything done by then. It was never too outrageous, and we always had a good understanding on time and tasks. He drove away, and I am at this property all alone. I walk into the house, it's almost empty. My job was to remove all remaining furniture, contents, and appliances, remove all the flooring, gut the kitchen and bathrooms, and remove all the wood paneling. This project was going to be like what we now call a flip. They were going to fix it up and sell it. Almost immediately, I get kind of spooked by this place. It was very odd. Now mind you, I'm used to being on sites, alone, working all night. This was the daytime on a Saturday and bright outside. However, the house was dark, old, musty, and kind of cool inside. The kind of cool that gives you goosebumps. To add to the spook factor, the house. Let me describe what I remember about the house. Imagine walking back in time to the 1960s or earlier. Dark green carpet that looked like matted down broccoli. Pine wood everywhere that had a darker stain to it. Pine wood everywhere that had a darker stain to it. The wood paneling wasn't the kind used in the 1980s sheet paneling, but actual board paneling tongued and grooved. Old window curtains that all looked like someone's grandma made. Avocado green sink, stovetop oven, and the stuff that was left behind like old furniture, and a closet full of old stuffed animals that looked to be about 30 years old. The style of this house was like an old western ranch, as there were wagon wheels inside and outside the house. I had an old battery-powered radio, but only could get a few stations, but was just happy for the noise. I started removing all the junk from the house, as I normally did on a project. If there wasn't a dumpster on site, I made a trash pile. I tore up all the flooring next. To my delight, everything seemed to come up with ease and it was a rip, cut, and toss. I took a big demo hammer to the kitchen and tore it apart in less than an hour. I ended up using that big jug of water that my boss had given me to wash my hands and face periodically, but by late noon, as most who know the desert, the dryness also starts to take moisture from you, especially if you're working in it. So by late afternoon, I am down to my last drink, and I had already ate everything I bought. No worries, I thought, the guys should be here in a couple hours to pick me up. As the time gets closer for them to arrive, I'm all done with my tasks. I even sweep the entire place, and it's now ready for the rehab crew to get back to work, making this place look modern. The time of year I was out here, it wasn't a typical hot desert day, but you know, in the desert, as soon as the sun goes down, it starts to cool rapidly. I had a flannel shirt, but that wasn't enough, and it was starting to get dark. This was the time before cell phones were common, and while there was no electricity, water, and phone service to the house, I climbed up to get on top of the roof of the house to get a better look to see if I can see something in the distance. And what looked like miles down, I saw a smaller road that this dirt road led to and a few homes, but their homes were all dark. My first thought was, hike down the neighbor's house, ask them to use the phone. The nearest house, no one was home, and this home also looked abandoned. If you remember, in the early 90s was the start of a decline in the economy and recession, so it wasn't uncommon for a lot of foreclosures in tract of homes. A lot of those I worked on at that time. I started to think about my options as darkness fast approached. One was to stay at the house until morning. 2, hike with what little water I had a few miles in the dark Mojave night. 3, wait until early morning and hike out of there to some sort of civilization. It also suddenly occurred to me that no one knew I was here except my boss. I don't know if he told anyone else where I was, and certainly my family wouldn't miss me until maybe Sunday night, but I didn't even tell them I was going out to work there. They knew me and how much I would work to save up for the car, that they never worried about me not coming home. As full darkness was all around me, it was amazing looking out at the night sky, and lucky for me, the moon was bright. I didn't have a flashlight or any way to make a fire, even though I tried. I was going to make a small bonfire out of broken up construction debris as the temperature started to fall, probably down to the low 40s. My only option was to go back inside the empty, creepy house that somehow seemed even more creepy, sitting alone in the dark. At about 8 p.m., the batteries on my radio, which was my only source of little light and noise, started to die. I grabbed an old wooden chair and sat in the living room of this house facing the door. I'm starting to hear wind, odd noises which I assume are the animals in the distance, and what sounds like leaves crackling under my feet. I'm starting to shiver from the cold, so I set off on trying to start a fire in the fireplace. Imagine, like Tom Hanks in Castaway trying to start a fire. At least this is keeping my mind of my situation. Sitting in this living room next to the fireplace, the house seems even more darker than it should have. Mind you, in the daytime, the inside seemed dark. So with only the moonlight, I was pretty much sitting in complete darkness. My mind starts to play tricks on me. I am seeing shadows moving outside and inside the house. I'm also starting to hear someone talking, like whispers or something. I get up from my chair and yell out, "Hello!" And just as I do, I hear something fall from the other side of the house. I run over to the door and go outside again. At least in the moonlight I can see better, but off in the distance I hear noises and see movement, but can't make it out. I have a pile of tools by the edge of the house ready for when my boss picks me up, so I run over there and grab Big Daddy. It was my heavy pry bar that I used in demo. I was ready to defend myself for who or what was out there. I have to keep moving because my undershirt and flannel shirt weren't enough to keep me warm. The wind was also starting to pick up, and for as far as I could see, no lights around me. I didn't want to try to make it up on the house again out of fear of falling in the dark, but I get up on top of the gate just to try and gain a little bit of altitude to see if I see some house lights on nearby or car lights. My mind went to the stories that circled around at that time about how people would come up to Mojave Desert and bury bodies, and how there were Satanist groups out here, and how people would go missing for no reason out here. Every noise had me on edge, and every shadow had my heart pounding. Now I knew no one was in that house, but I swear, I would hear noises from inside. I huddled up on the front porch, looking in the living room window, expecting to see someone at any moment. But around 11 p.m., I look at my watch, thinking, this is going to be a long night. As all this stuff only happened since it got dark, I don't know how I'm going to make it another 6 hours till daybreak. I start thinking the moment it gets to daybreak, like the moment lights start to appear on the horizon, I'm going to take the little water I had left and walk east. I knew, going east, I would eventually make it somewhere. The dirt road I was off of, I knew that direction led to a paved road. Closer to midnight, I'm wide awake, my eyes fixed on the dirt road, thinking that any time now a car would come down it and maybe they can call for help for me. I remember casually turning to look back into the house, as all this time I keep hearing noises but telling myself maybe a rat or some animal. I see a shadow of a person move from the kitchen to down the hall. I jump up from sitting down and was like, that is not an animal, that is a human. I start backing my way out of the porch towards a pile and trip over debris and fall down on the ground. I get up but fall again. It was like something pushed me down, or my imagination, but all of a sudden these bright lights are coming closer to me as I am laying on the ground. I jump up and it's my boss. He's looking at me like, what the heck are you doing? I was just so glad to see him. I wasn't mad or anything, just asked him what happened. He said that he was sorry, but he thought the other crew was coming to get me and they thought he was coming. So no one actually came. He said it wasn't until later in the evening he asked the other crew leader about how far along I got that he said I didn't go get him. Well, it took him almost 2 hours from where they were working to come get me. He felt really bad and told me he was going to pay for me for the entire time I was out here. He also grabbed a can of Coke from his cooler and asked me if I was thirsty, and I drank that all in one gulp. And once we got back towards civilization, he went through a fast food drive-through, and I ate like I never ate before. As he was driving me home, I asked him about that house. I told him how creepy it was. He said he didn't have any information on the house, only just what we were supposed to do. After that, I made sure to always keep extra batteries, flashlights, and double the amount of liquid.